Let's take a little deeper look at crankbaits. You know, when you're either fishing from the top down or from the bottom up. And what I mean by that is, like, when you're fishing from the bottom up, you say you're using a jig and you're letting the jig to go all the way down to the bottom. You're pulling it up slowly, kind of bouncing it off. You know you're a foot, 2 feet, or whatever you're fishing off the bottom. You have some control of that. On a crankbait, there you're fishing from the top down. So when you cast it out there and you start reeling in, you know it goes down, but you don't always exactly know where it goes. Let's say a bait's supposed to go 7 feet down with maybe 14-pound test line. Well, where does that take place? How deep is that? Because you really need to know. When you consider, let's say you're fishing reeds, and you're fishing the reed tops, and you're in 15 feet of water, and the reeds are coming all the way up to 10. Well, then you know you want to have your bait go down 5 feet or so. So you want to get a bait that will go down to 5 feet and tip the top of those reeds. But sometimes we don't know exactly where that is in the cast. Well, we've got some help with it. There's a number of books on the market that will help you show you where the depths are. But here's one that I like to use, and it's Rapala. It's called the Little Tackle Box Guide, and I like it. It works real well, and who better than Rapala to be able to tell where the crankbait goes down. Let's take a look at one of the basic baits here. You get the idea how a book like this can help you and an understanding of your bait. Now, in this particular one here, this is called the Shad Rap, which is a pretty popular bait out there. But in this particular one on 14 foot of line, it would normally go down on a 70-foot cast, which is a decent cast and pretty typical. It will go down to 7 feet at its maximum. But take a look at the chart there. When we make that cast at 70 foot, it doesn't immediately jolt down to 7 feet. It takes almost 40 feet before it actually hits that 7 feet. Now, the other point to look at here is that it only stays at that for about 15 feet. When you look over again, it's at the 12 or 13 feet and it starts coming back up. Now, this is using when your rod tip is only 2 feet off the water surface. So you know you're already getting it down there really strong. Now, let's take a look at one other thing here. On the right there, you see the difference that an 8-pound test line versus a 20-pound test line on the depth that any cast you make reaches. So the heavier the line, obviously, the less you're going to get in depth. Now, if you take a look at the trolling side and taking the same lure and you troll it, you can be very effective on controlling that depth. And not only the depth, but you get more depth out of it by the line you let out. Let's take a look at the chart, and this will help us to understand that more clearly. Now, on this chart, you'll see on the left side is how far the lure actually goes down, the feet down, and how many feet you have to let the lure back to get to that depth. And you just kind of follow it across. Now, if we wanted to go down 10 feet, the one that we have to let out 60 feet of line. You see where that little lines come together? So 10 feet deep, if we wanted to have that same lure go down 10 feet. One thing about trolling is you really can control the depth on that because it will maintain that as long as you keep proper speed and you keep that length of line out. Now, if you want to go down deeper, as you see, if you let out close to 100 feet, we're say, for example, then you're about that between 11 and 12 feet down. This can be a great book. As a matter of fact, if you can understand the depth of the lure, it will be like dynamite out there. Well, as you can see, there's a lot of great tips and understanding of the crankbait that puts you on more fish for sure. One other part of the system that's important is the line, rod, and reel that you use. When you're talking about using crankbaits like we are, typically you want to use a mono. And the reason I say that is mono has more stretch than these super braids and so forth. And when you don't have any stretch, you have more opportunity to rip those little hooks out of that fish's mouth. So when you have a mono, it gives you a little more forgiving as you set the hook. Secondly, you want to get a rod that has a nice flex in the tip. Not so stiff, not a fast action rod. You want it pretty soft at the tip. You want to have good backbone so when you're fighting the fish that you can pull them in and set the hook, but you still got some flexibility so you're not just counting on your drag or your reel. Another thing about your reel, you don't need to have a real fast reel. Sometimes the best reel all around is a 5-to-1 ratio that maybe brings in anywhere from 18 to 20 inches of line. You can certainly cast a crankbait and reel it in with a 7-to-1 or 6-to-1 reel, but you don't need that high speed. In fact, the more steady, more constant, more control you get with the reel that you're not pushing too hard or fighting too hard as you bring it in will really help you cast it, and especially when you're out there all day casting these crankbaits and catching some fish. That's great. Well, I'll tell you what, don't go away because we got more of the Fishing Show.